in the entire world for home loans is India. We have less than 1% as NPA for home loans, and hence everybody repays home loans. Hence, the loan to value needs to be increased from 65, 70% to 90% so that everybody can actually take the money to a 15-year money, 20-year money, and be able to buy a house. So I think that time has come where we don't need to give free houses, but we at least need to give them a loan availability for long term in order to be able to have the capacity to buy the house. And this is exactly what has happened. You see all the housing finance companies or banks or financial institutions, the loan, the total loan quantum has increased by more than 22% on an average of institutions which are giving home loans. So I think this is a segment where without having an additional amount for the budget, you can actually grow the economy, create more housing, create more homes availability. I think that's a huge thing that we can possibly do without actually giving up too much on the budget.
Okay, so it'd be good to have, along with the, well, thanks for that, Niranjan, along with Chandrajit, who's the Director General of CII, we've just had the head of ASSOCHAM. We're now joined by Arun Chawla, who's the Director General of FICCI. So it's great to have both the DGs of FICCI and CII on the same at the same time. Mr. Chawla, we're discussing the macro picture right now. What, according to you, is the biggest expectation of FICCI or India Inc., and how big specifically is the concern about inflation? Because you were suggesting to the government to constitute a food inflation response and strategy team to work across multiple government agencies to address the issue of food inflation. Why were you so focused on the issue of food inflation and also the bigger picture?
Good morning. Before I even answer your question, let me share the fact that, I'll reiterate it, that despite the global headwinds, India remains the fastest growing economy, as pointed out in the economic survey yesterday. That puts India's GDP growth at 7% for the year 23 and 6.5% for the next year. Now, this is essentially due to the continued thrust by the government on policy reforms and push to capital expenditure even during the pandemic. Now, coming to your question, the geopolitical situation continues to create headwinds, so we need the growth momentum to continue. And this can, of course, happen when the budget will re-emphasize on the thrust area of the government, which is, to put it succinctly, give a boost to investment and growth, which is by way of capital expenditure, physical, social infrastructure. Then coming to improving India's competitiveness to be the global manufacturing hub. The PLI schemes are an excellent initiative. This could be extended to a few more sectors like toys, leather, chemicals. Also, the government could consider extending the concessional tax regime for manufacturing operation for at least 5 years. Now, currently it is only up to March 31st, 2024. Now, all this will ensure stability and certainty, and thus bolster the confidence of the investors to set up manufacturing units in India. I would even say that consider enhancing the ROTTEP scheme to include iron and steel under Chapter 72. The further improvement in ease of doing business. This is an ongoing exercise, but an important thing to be done as a part of the budget would be to simplify compliance with respect to TDS. Currently, the Act, there is a wide variety of TDS provisions applicable to payments to residents with different rates and different thresholds. This gives rise to unwarranted disputes related to categorization and interpretation. Now, to further enhance the ease of doing business, the government should consider laying down a roadmap for rationalization of the TDS structure. It is suggested that there be only 3 rate structures for TDS payments. TDS on salary at a slab rate and 2 standard rates for TDS for different categories. The standard revenue neutral rates may be evaluated and worked out by the revenue department based on data analytics. Now, giving a boost to innovation ecosystem and a further boost to digitization should also be the focus. There is a need to attract innovation, research-led businesses, particularly in the new age technology areas, including green technology. A concessional tax regime similar to the tax regime for new manufacturing companies may be considered even for non-manufacturing research and innovation-led companies. And then, of course, greater use of ICT, drones, and so on. FICCI has really been pushing towards the concept of green economy for sustainable growth, a comprehensive national policy framework including a well-defined, standardized taxonomy will provide a real thrust to green financing in the country. Now, when we are talking about the inflation, why FICCI is talking about the food inflation, because that is something which affects A to Z everybody in the country. While we agree with the economic survey that authorities are expected to remain vigilant and proactive in managing any inflationary, we hope the government will put forward a strategic framework for managing inflation. As you said, FICCI has suggested a proactive food inflation response and strategy team mechanism for creating an e-enabled, empowered coordination framework along with global market intelligence mechanism that can aid in better forecasts and planning. Now, before I the expectations, I think I should not leave out the MSMEs. A special attention is needed as MSMEs are a backbone of the Indian economy, and it is expected that budget will not leave them untouched in two areas, specific areas which need handholding. One is the area of digitization. Develop a special purpose credit scheme to digitize a micro enterprise. And the other is MSMEs could be incentivized for their transition to sustainable goals.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just a thought while you were speaking there, Mr. Mahathur. GVL, I see a hand go up. I want to go cut to the chase, and before I go across, we'll be joined by Sanjeev Bajaj, President of CI, in just a minute. But GVL, can the budget reduce spending on subsidies? Is that even an option in a pre-election year? No. MR says no. Okay, MR. I put MR on the left.
Yeah, good morning to
MR
you
says
and all
no.
the
Good morning. Yes, GVL. Yes, PK says hello. MR, go on. Why not?
Yeah, you see, on the food inflation front, on the inflation front, let me say that this government has had a remarkable record. And if you look at past 75 years of independent India, it's only during the BJP governments at the center the inflation remained well under control. The whole world in the last couple of years has been experiencing 50-year highest inflation levels, but we have certainly contained them very well. And as the prices of cereals go up, only in the last few days, the Food Corporation decided to release 3 million tons into the open market to cool the prices down. I think UPA and NDA, if you compare the past 20 years, the NDA shines like a very, very, very good performing government. Okay, any new mechanism suggested is always always welcome for consideration. But it must
I'm trying to see the balance. I'm trying to see the balance. Let's put MR also on, please, right now. With GVL and Sunil right there in the middle. I'm trying to understand the balance. You have to invest a lot on infrastructure for the future, but you have an election coming, and you also have to spend a lot on food subsidies, a lot on fertilizer subsidies, and a lot of fuel subsidies. And then you also have to manage the fiscal deficit.
This is a government that does not.
Can you do everything at the same time?
This government, I think Honorable Prime Minister, if you have seen him for 8.5 years here, and earlier as Chief Minister for nearly 12-13 years, he does not look at the short-term objectives. He does not look at any short-term temptations. He's a leader who always looks at
I understand. No, there's no question on intentions.
So this will be a national budget. This will not be an election budget.
I take that to Sanjeev Bajaj, who's chairman and managing director and CEO of Bajaj Finserv. We have MR, you wanted to add in? Yeah, go on, please, MR.
Yeah, Arnab, the fertilizer subsidy, food subsidy are the backbone of your entire food security.
What did she say?
You just cannot in an election year, even think about or debating about cutting them. Of course, you can increase their operational efficiency. And the DBT has done more or less brought in a very good amount of operational efficiency. So I think this is one area where subject to vagaries of the fuel, petrodollar prices, I don't think so. We should tamper with them. Let the schemes go on as it is. In an election year, it is well settled. People are happy. And remember, you have also promised to feed 80 crore people in this year, in the run-up to the election, because of various reasons. Now, I think it should not be disturbed. It should not be even debated.
I think can be debated. Okay, Sunil Mathur is with us, MD and CEO of Siemens. Mr. Mathur, you've been saying India's market is hugely attractive, but what is the one aspect of the budget, for example, which should be addressed to ensure that we grow on par with global markets while safeguarding from the recession that other markets fear from? I am just focusing in this section on global headwinds.
Well, I think the government has done quite a lot already and has managed the last 2 or 3 years very, very well. One of the things that have attracted India increasingly on the global scene has been the capital expenditure on infrastructure spend. And this is something that India always needed, as we know. Infrastructure was an area that needed huge improvement. And I think the fact that the government has been 2 years in a row, and I hope continued in this budget, to spend on capital expenditure on improving the infrastructure is something that is very, very attractive to international players. In addition to that, I think the continuity of focus on ease of doing business. I think this is something as well that international players are looking at, the speed of tendering, the international contracting modalities, the ease of doing business. And I think a lot is happening in that direction, and I hope will continue to happen following the budget today.
Well, thank you very much for that. So, by the way, Sunil Mathur represents Siemens, and Siemens, I think, has benefited from the massive infrastructure push given by the government. It signed a 26,000 crore contract with the Indian Railways to supply and service electric locomotives. So best of luck to you. I think he's going to be looking extremely keenly at what is announced on the infrastructure side. So we'll talk after the budget. Sunil, thanks for your comment there. But my question is now to a broader level: can we manage both? Ashish, can we manage subsidies, infrastructure push and fiscal deficit? I don't know how we can manage both.
See, as you move to the next year, the impact of inflation or the higher fertilizer prices, which were a function of the Ukraine crisis, is already going to play in. So you're going to see fertilizer subsidy, food subsidy, oil-related, inflation going down. Given a choice between subsidy, fiscal deficit, and managing growth, I think we have constantly been saying, and in fact you also said it some time back, that India needs jobs. So the two things that the government will have to focus on, and given a choice between fiscal deficit and growth, I think the focus should be on growth, and focus should be on PLI, which is basically job oriented or export oriented PLI. Say for example the toys industry. So in my opinion, managing both is possible because the headwinds have gone. You have a massive tailwind coming your way because of the fertilizer prices coming down significantly. Oil has come down significantly. So I don't think, as we move to the next year, you should see this problem. This problem was purely this year because of an exceptionally high 1,50,000 or between 1 to 1,50,000 exceptional expenditure that has come in the form of fertilizer subsidy. I don't think
this
really
is the tightrope here, right? This is the tightrope here, isn't it, Ajay? PK, isn't this the tightrope here? You got elections, you got subsidies, you got opportunity, you got global recession, you got infrastructure spending, right? So Sohail, everything's happening at this is a huge, it's a very interesting year, it's unusual year.
No tightrope. Let me just say, there is no tightrope. Okay, Arnab, there really is no tightrope here because the government's revenue has been really strong. The strong revenue performance. So if you look at the fiscal deficit in the April to December period, the fiscal deficit for April to December this year is just 59% of the target for the full year. Normally, by this time in the year, the fiscal deficit target for the full year is exceeded. Because the strongest quarter for revenue is the final quarter of the year, January to March. We haven't even seen that January to March quarter data yet. And so the actual fiscal deficit this year will be lower than the 6.4% of GDP that is budgeted and is in the revised estimate.
If someone's asking me, what are you looking at in this budget for?
Very important statistical point.
Can I come in?
Yes, Ajay, go on. Go on, Ajay, yes. Ajay Dua, yes.
Yes, Arnab, I think, yes, it is a tough exercise, but doable for the simple reason that the denominator, when you measure the fiscal deficit, outgoing divided by the GDP, with a 6 to 6.5% in real terms GDP growth, we would have a larger denominator to divide it by.
Absolutely.
And as has been pointed out, the subsidy bill on chemical fertilizers is likely to come down from 2.5 trillion rupees, 2.5 lakh crore rupees to 2 lakhs because of the softening of the international prices of crude.
Okay,
alongside.
One minute. You made a point on fertilizer. I want to go back to PK because he had an unfinished point. See, PK, I think it will be magical if we find the right balance between fiscal boundaries and subsidies, and all the spending that we have to do. Can you elaborate on that? You were on a good point.
Okay, now there are two sides to the budget. One is the spending. So subsidies are part of the spending. Subsidies now are a very small proportion of total government spending. You see, what has happened is that this government has reduced the importance of subsidies. The oil subsidy used to be a huge number. That has been reduced dramatically because global prices are passed on to domestic consumers quite quickly, which is what should happen in a normal functioning economy. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, the food subsidy has increased a lot this year, but as a proportion of the total expenditure, it's small. Now, if you look at the revenue side is where the performance has been spectacular, both this year and last year. So if you look at corporate and income tax revenue, they are up more than 20% year on year. The GST revenue is also up more than 20%. These are the three largest sources of tax revenue. They are all growing more than 20% year on year. They were expected to grow in low single digits in the budget. So the budget was expecting low single digit growth in the three main heads of tax revenue. The actual performance is 3 times that pace of growth. So with that, the actual fiscal deficit this year will be much lower. Anyway, the government remains very conservative. It's still saying the revised estimate will be 6.4% of GDP deficit. But in reality, it's likely to be lower than 6%. It'll be around 5.8% this year. So there is a lot of room for maneuver. I think the key thing to understand is there's a massive amount of room for maneuver. And the government is going to be able to spend on subsidies. It'll be able to spend on infrastructure and still meet its fiscal deficit target. In fact, not just meet it, but substantially exceed it. You see, what Nirmala Sitharaman has been really good at is creating low expectations and then exceeding them, not by a small amount, but by massive amounts. If you look at last year's revenue performance as well, it was really way ahead. And this year too, the revenue performance has been really good. And of course, that has allowed the government to do things like cut the excise duty on petroleum. So by cutting excise duty on petrol and diesel, it has not really suffered any significant consequence because the other sources of revenue are doing so well. And the sources of revenue are doing well because nominal and real GDP is growing a lot faster than was projected in the budget.
I take
so
it. I think
you
I
basically
think,
have
I think
a much
what you've said
stronger
there,
economy than most people realize.
I think
Nominal
that has
GDP
been very
growth in the first half of the fiscal year was 21%.
No, I think what he's saying there, and by the way, the person on the left with that fantastic blue jacket and striking blue ties, Kamal Bali of Volvo, I think he's introducing a new color to the next round of Volvo cars, I think, out there. Good to see you in such colorful form this morning. Sohail's coming back on the screen. Sohail, bringing you back in a minute. Now, the question here is...
I have to leave. I have to take a flight to Bombay. So I just want to make two very quick points. When the corporate tax was reduced by the finance minister, I expected a commensurate level of spending from the private sector, which, by the way, has not happened.
Not happen. Good point.
I hope it happens with alacrity because, the private sector can't keep asking for things and doing nothing in return. There has to be a national quid pro quo when you ask for favors. That's number one. Number two,
doing the heavy lifting.
Please remember, India is run by the IMS, the Indian Magician Service. This is not the Indian Administrative Service. They are capable of doing anything. They would put a circus to shame. So remember one thing, they are trapeze artists of the highest order. They can make many things which are diametrically opposite come together in great harmony. On that note, since I've praised everyone, may I seek your indulgence to leave as I board the flight.
Oh, you better make sure you land on time. No, absolutely. I think you should have this hovercraft to take you between cities. You've really added color today. Sohail, I'll see you in the evening. Join me in the studio there. And Kamal.
Jai Maharashtra. Since I'm coming there.
Yeah, please. Thank you. You're welcome. Kamal Bali is with us, President MD of the Volvo Group. A big story here. I don't want you to talk only of the auto sector. I want you to give me an overall sense of how you feel about the country at this point of time. Not just how Volvo feels, how you feel as a corporate, and also, of course, from your sector's point of view, which is a significant contribution to our GDP.
Right. No, so absolutely. I mean, Arnab, I think we all know the world is in a flux, but Indian economy has been doing pretty well post the pandemic. In fact, the way we have bounced back on all the macros, whether it is the growth, whether it is stemming inflation, whether it is exports, even though exports are under pressure. But we have done well even on exports because if we remember last year was a record high exports. This year, of course, we are under pressure due to global economy being under pressure. So we've been doing very well on most of the macroeconomic parameters. Of course, we know the global environment is pretty fragile and there is still inflationary trend. But I think the good news for us is that we have done well on most of these parameters. So that's the first big thing. So overall, we have set a stage from where we can launch much bigger initiatives going forward. So and therefore manufacturing, which is one of the very predominant, almost 45% of manufacturing is automotive industry. So automotive industry has a great chance to take forward the manufacturing sector. And just to alluding to one of the points which Sohail made, that private sector not investing enough. I think you will see, thanks to the PLI schemes and all, you will see private sector investing a fair bit, and you will see whether it is battery technology, whether it is hydrogen fuel cells. So part of the energy transition which is going to happen for the automotive sector, I think a lot of investment is going to come in. And with new technologies like ADAS systems and hydrogen fuel cells, alternative non-fossil fuels coming in. So you will see a lot of investment coming in. So I'm pretty sure of that. That's the first piece. The other is the infrastructure spends by the government. I think this is going to be another very major driver for growth and for economy and for the automotive sector. So investments on roads, bridges, highways, and creating those dedicated freight corridors, bringing in tremendous amount of logistics efficiency in the country. And I think this to me is going to be the big piece going forward, because logistics efficiency, which is today our logistics cost is about 14% of our GDP. I think going forward, the goal is to get down to about 9 to 10%. So that can be a huge, and with this PM Gati Shakti master plan, all the projects are now going in a synchronous manner. I think this is going to be another very main driver of efficiencies, growth, and growth in the economy. So overall, I see positive trends. Of course, the caveat is always interest rates and inflationary trends, which is something which we need to constantly tame. If we can manage these two things, I think India is on for a. I think this decade, as our president, Mr. Sanjeev Bajaj, also alluded to, I think this decade
and Sanjeev is there with
a
you,
growth
in fact.
decade which will belong to India. To
Sanjeev is in fact on air with you right now, Kamal. So good morning, Sanjeev. Sanjeev is the chairman, MD and CEO of Bajaj Finserv, current president of the Confederation of Indian Industry, and has been engaging with the body for many years, regional, state, national level. CI has of course churned out key recommendations for budget 2023. So just to start with, since you hail the economic survey saying the government is on track to achieve the fiscal deficit target. We've been talking about this, Sanjeev, for some time, and PK Basu, great macroeconomics, just said we have a lot of headroom. Now that's very encouraging to hear. You have also said that there is a huge scope for increasing capex in infrastructure. PK just said we have the financial headroom with our tax collections. But the question will be, what role will corporate India play? Sohail made an interesting and rather controversial comments just before by saying, well, corporate tax rates went down. What has corporate India done to increase its investment? So would you like to respond to that, both from your expectations as well as the role of corporate India in this regard?
Sure, Arnab, and it's great to be on the channel again. So very clearly, we recognize and appreciate that in the last few years, the government has played a strong role in their public sector capex funding, and that has helped this economy, and we hope they continue to do that. The question comes about the private sector. Private sector capital needs to earn a certain minimum level of return. To that extent, the color is slightly different in public sector. We have seen in the last 6-7 years that while there hasn't been too much investment on the private capex side, there are segments in the last year where this investment has started happening. So if you look at chemicals, if you look at commodities like steel, if you look at sectors, anything to do with construction, housing, you have seen that growing, but we naturally need to see a lot more. The good news is that many sectors now have reached capacity utilizations where they need to invest more. The challenge was the external uncertain environment due to which companies were hesitating. It is comforting from the economic survey to know that the revival period is over and they see that growth should now come back as normal. We know that we still have some external issues. The war still continues. Internally, inflation has to come into a band that RBI is comfortable. It's at the upper end of that band right now. But I would expect that with these factors normalizing in the coming quarters, you will see more and more segments of private sector investing for the future as well.
That's amazing. I'll take one more comment. Question is, you've also said, I was watching your comments very carefully, Sanjeev. You said that we need to work on our inefficiencies before product reach markets, and take cues from our global peers in this matter. So what were you talking